She stood at the altar, the soft glow of the afternoon sun filtering through the stained glass windows. The church was quiet, except for the faint rustle of her dress brushing against the polished floor. Around her, familiar faces smiled and whispered, but she felt miles away, caught between the present moment and a past she thought she'd buried long ago. Her heart wasn't at peace. It was heavy, trembling with a secret that no one could see. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Years of waiting, hoping, and healing had led her here, yet doubt gnawed at the edges of her mind. Was this truly the life she wanted? The man standing beside her was kind, steady, and reliable, but his calmness only reminded her of the storm she once lived through. The love she was about to promise forever wasn't the kind that took her breath away. It was comfortable, safe, but her heart remembered something different. She glanced toward the heavy wooden doors at the back of the church. It was the same view she had seen so many times in her dreams, but today felt different. The space seemed smaller somehow, charged with an energy she couldn't explain. She felt the weight of every eye on her, every breath held in quiet anticipation. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her bouquet, the white roses crisp and fragrant in the still air. As the organ began to play softly, her mind drifted to a time years ago, before this moment, before this life was planned. There had been another man, a man who had once held her heart so tightly it hurt to breathe. Their love had been wild, passionate, full of promises whispered in the dark, promises broken by distance and silence. He had vanished from her life suddenly, leaving behind only memories and a hollow ache she carried silently. She had tried to move on, to build a life where love didn't hurt. She met the man beside her now and found comfort in his steady presence. He was patient, dependable, the kind of man anyone would be lucky to marry. But the truth was, her heart had never quite forgiven the past. It never stopped waiting for a chance that seemed impossible. The music swelled as she took her first steps down the aisle. Her dress shimmered in the sunlight, but inside, her world felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Every face she passed smiled warmly, but none knew the battle raging behind her eyes. She smiled back politely, hiding the storm beneath her calm exterior. As she moved closer to the altar, her mind raced with what-ifs. What if he had stayed? What if he had fought for her? Could she have been happy in a different life? These thoughts came unbidden, sharp and unwelcome. She pushed them away, forcing herself to focus on the man waiting for her. His eyes were kind, full of hope. He reached out his hand, and for a moment she almost took it. But the past whispered louder, reminding her of what she had never truly left behind. Her heart pounded louder now, echoing in her ears. Then, suddenly, the heavy church doors slammed open with a loud bang that silenced everything. Heads turned sharply. A rush of cold air swept through the aisle, lifting her veil like a sudden gust of wind. Breathless and desperate, a figure appeared in the doorway, someone she thought she'd never see again. Time seemed to freeze as the man she truly loved ran toward her. His eyes were wide with urgency and regret, his clothes disheveled from the hurried journey. The crowd gasped, whispers rising in waves as he closed the distance between them. Every step he took stirred old memories, rekindling feelings she had tried so hard to forget. She stood rooted to the spot, unable to move or speak. The steady man beside her frowned in confusion, his hopeful smile fading. The man reaching out to her was a ghost from the past, a living reminder of a love she thought was lost forever. Her heart wrenched with pain and longing, torn between two worlds she could no longer ignore. The church was silent once more, the tension thick enough to touch. The guests watched, breath held, as the moment stretched, fragile and raw. She looked into the eyes of the man who had come back to her, seeing in them all the years of regret and hope. In that moment, she realized that nothing about today would be simple, and the choice she faced would change everything. Her hands trembled as she stared at the man who had just appeared in the doorway. The years had passed, but his face was burned into her memory like a photograph left in the sun, faded but never forgotten. His eyes, wild and searching, held a weight she hadn't been prepared to carry today. He was out of breath, his clothes rumpled, as if he had been running not just through the streets, but through every moment that had slipped away between them. She had spent so many nights replaying their story, wondering where it all went wrong. They had met young, reckless, and full of dreams that seemed too big for the small town they lived in. He was different, unpredictable, daring, and she was drawn to him like a moth to flame. They believed they were invincible, that love could conquer anything. But life had a way of unraveling even the strongest threads. Distance came between them, misunderstandings grew, and slowly they drifted apart without ever saying goodbye. Her fiancé watched the scene unfold, his confusion deepening with each passing second. He was a man who had built his life on stability, who believed that love meant trust and quiet support. But now, standing here, he saw something in her eyes, a hesitation, a pain, that no promise or ring could erase. The smile he had worn so proudly was now gone, replaced by a shadow of doubt. She wanted to speak, to explain, but the words were caught somewhere between her heart and her lips. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. The man who had just arrived stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never stopped loving you," he said, the confession raw and vulnerable. "I should have come back sooner. I was afraid, but I was wrong." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the faces around her. It wasn't just the words, it was the years of waiting, the nights spent alone, the hope she had buried deep beneath her pain. She thought she had moved on. She thought she had healed. But hearing him say those words now made the wounds open again, fresh and aching. The guests shifted uncomfortably. This was no longer a simple wedding. It was a crossroads where past and present collided. Some whispered about the scandal. Others exchanged sympathetic glances. But no one dared interrupt the moment. It was hers, and hers alone. She glanced down at the bouquet in her hands, the white roses suddenly feeling heavy and meaningless. She remembered the promises she was about to make, the vows rehearsed countless times. But now they felt hollow, like words spoken to a stranger. How could she promise forever to someone when a part of her was still reaching for a love lost to time? Her fiancé finally spoke, voice steady but tinged with pain. "If he's who you want, I won't stand in your way." His kindness was heartbreaking, but she saw the hurt beneath. He had loved her in his own quiet way, and now he was letting go. She wanted to thank him for his understanding, but her throat tightened, and no words came. The man who had come back reached for her hand again, trembling as he spoke. "I know I'm late. I know I don't deserve this chance. But if you'll let me, I want to make it right. I want to be there for you, now and always." Her heart was a storm, wild and confused. She looked into his eyes, searching for the truth beneath the desperation. Was this real? Or just a dream conjured by years of longing? Could love really survive the time lost, the pain endured? She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every choice she had ever made pressing down on her. The church felt colder now, the bright sunlight outside a stark contrast to the darkness swirling inside her. The man beside her, the one waiting patiently for her answer, was watching, waiting for a sign. Her breath caught as memories flooded back, the laughter, the tears, the promises whispered in the dark. She realized that this moment was more than a wedding. It was a test of her heart, a chance to face the past and decide what the future could be. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she finally found her voice. "I don't know what the future holds," she said softly, "but I can't pretend my heart isn't still tied to you." The words hung in the air, fragile and true. The man smiled, relief flooding his face. The steady man nodded, a quiet strength in his eyes as he stepped back, giving her space to choose. In that moment, surrounded by silence and the watchful eyes of everyone she knew, she took a slow, steady breath and allowed herself to hope once more. The past had returned, not as a shadow to haunt her, but as a chance to heal, to forgive, and maybe, just maybe, to love again. As she stood there caught between two men and two futures, the church seemed to shrink around her. The guests held their breath, watching her every move, but she felt detached, like she was floating above the scene, watching someone else's life unfold. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, hope, fear, all battling for control. She looked at the man who had been waiting for her all these years, the one she was supposed to marry. His eyes were filled with pain, but also understanding. He had built a life with her in mind, dreamed of their future together. Yet now, standing in front of her, he realized that love wasn't always enough to hold two hearts together. His steady presence was a contrast to the chaos she felt inside, but she admired his grace in this impossible moment. Then she turned to the man who had just burst into the church, breathless and desperate. His face was flushed, sweat mingling with tears. There was something raw and real about him, an unpolished honesty she had missed. He wasn't perfect, but he was real. He was the man who had ignited her first true love, who had shattered her heart and now wanted to put the pieces back together. Her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. The weight of a decision she never imagined making pressed down on her. She thought she'd been ready to start fresh, to close the chapter on the past, but the past had other plans. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a crossroads, a reckoning of years lost and hearts broken. Her breath came faster, her chest tightening with the struggle inside her. The music had stopped, leaving a heavy silence that amplified every heartbeat. She remembered the nights she cried alone, the dreams she gave up, the hope she buried deep beneath the pain. Could she risk all that again? Could she open herself to love after so much hurt? The man beside her took a step forward, his voice gentle but steady. "Whatever you decide, I want you to be happy." His words were kind, but they also carried the weight of someone letting go. She saw the quiet strength it took to say that, and her heart ached for him. Then the other man reached out, his hand trembling as he touched hers. "I know I'm late. I know I've made mistakes. But if you give me one chance, I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." His voice was full of hope, but also vulnerability, like he was exposing the deepest part of himself, hoping she would still believe in them. She closed her eyes for a moment, fighting the flood of memories. She saw their first meeting, the spark, the laughter, the stolen moments that had once felt like a lifetime. She thought about the years apart, the letters that went unanswered, the silence that had stretched between them. Could love survive all that? When she opened her eyes, she realized something important. It wasn't about choosing the right man. It was about choosing the life she wanted, the one that would make her heart whole, not just comfortable. She wanted a love that was honest and brave, even if it was messy and uncertain. Her voice was barely a whisper as she finally spoke. "I need time. I can't make this decision now." It wasn't a refusal. It was a plea for space to understand her own heart. The crowd shifted, some nodding with sympathy, others murmuring in surprise. But she didn't care. This was her moment. The man who had waited patiently stepped back, giving her the space she needed. The man who had returned squeezed her hand gently, a silent promise that he would wait for her answer, no matter how long it took. The wedding day had turned into something no one expected, a test of love and courage. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt alive. The past had caught up with her, but it hadn't broken her. As the church doors slowly closed behind the man who had come back to her, she realized that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the truest happiness. And maybe, just maybe, love was worth the wait after all. The church was silent except for the soft whispers of stunned guests. She stood frozen, her heart pounding so loudly it felt like it could shatter the calm around her. The man she truly loved, the one she thought had disappeared forever, had just walked in, too late, yet somehow exactly on time. Her eyes searched his face, looking for answers that years had refused to give. He was breathing hard, sweat glistening on his brow, but his gaze held a fierce determination that had never faded. The moment stretched between them like a fragile thread, pulling tight with the weight of everything they had lost and everything they still hoped to find. She felt the grip of her fiancé's hand loosen beside her. His smile had disappeared, replaced by confusion and hurt. She could see the flicker of fear in his eyes, the fear of losing her, of losing the life they were about to build. But there was something more in that glance, a deep respect, almost like he understood this wasn't a battle he could win with words or promises. The man who had come back moved forward, his voice breaking the heavy silence. "I know I'm late. I know I missed so much. But I'm here now. And I'm not leaving without you." His words trembled with raw honesty, exposing a vulnerability she hadn't expected to see. Tears blurred her vision, mixing relief with a pain she thought had long healed. Memories flooded back, late-night talks, stolen kisses, dreams whispered under the stars. She remembered the laughter, the tears, the way he made her feel alive. It was a love that had never truly died, just been buried under the weight of time and circumstance. She felt 1,000 emotions crash over her at once: joy, fear, anger, hope. She wanted to believe in second chances, but the wounds of the past made her cautious. Could she risk her heart again? Could she trust that this time it would be different? The guests shifted in their seats, watching the drama unfold. Some exchanged sympathetic glances. Others whispered prayers for her courage. But she felt alone, standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. Her fiancé finally spoke, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "If he's who you truly want, I won't stand in your way." There was no bitterness, only a quiet dignity that made her heart ache. He had loved her in his own way, and now he was letting go, not with anger, but with grace. She looked down at the bouquet in her hands, the white roses suddenly feeling cold and fragile. The vows she had rehearsed 1,000 times now seemed meaningless. How could she promise forever when her heart was torn in two? The man who had returned took a tentative step closer, reaching out to gently hold her hand. "I can't change the past," he said softly, "but I want to spend every day making up for lost time. Please give me that chance." Her breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to hold its breath with her, waiting for her answer. She felt the weight of the moment settle deep inside her chest, a moment where past and present collided, and the future hung in the balance. She closed her eyes, searching within herself for the courage to choose. The memories came rushing back, the love, the loss, the hope. She thought about the life she had planned and the life she still dreamed of. And in that silence, she heard her heart speak clearly for the first time in years. When she opened her eyes, she knew she couldn't deny what she felt. "I don't know what happens next," she whispered, "but I can't ignore this. Not anymore." The man smiled, relief and hope shining in his eyes. The steady man nodded, stepping back with quiet acceptance. The church doors closed softly behind them as the moment passed, leaving behind a new beginning born from a love that refused to be forgotten. In that instant, she understood that sometimes love isn't about timing. It's about courage, the courage to face the past, to forgive, and to embrace the unknown. And with that, she took her first step into a future she never dared to imagine, hand in hand with the man who had come back just in time. The church doors had closed behind them, but the echoes of that day lingered like a whisper in the air. She walked slowly down the aisle, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope she hadn't felt in years. The man who had returned to her sighed, gently squeezed her hand, his eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt. But in that moment, she realized that doubt was no longer her companion. Instead, a fragile hope bloomed inside her, fragile but alive. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed their faces as they stepped into the quiet garden beside the church. The world moved on around them, unaware of the storm that had just passed and the fragile promise that had been made. The man who had waited so long for her to return looked at her with a tenderness that melted some of the walls she had built so carefully. "Do you really mean it?" she asked softly, still unsure if she was dreaming or waking from one. "After all this time, you still want me?" His smile was slow but genuine. "I never stopped. I thought I lost you forever, but here you are. And now, I won't let you go again." She felt tears prick at her eyes, not the sorrow of before, but a mix of relief and nervous excitement. The road ahead was uncertain, full of questions and challenges, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to walk it. Together. Their story wasn't simple. The years apart had left scars and silence that couldn't be erased overnight. She knew the past would come calling, memories and doubts lurking in the shadows. But standing there, holding his hand, she felt the strength to face whatever was coming. She thought of the man she had almost married, the one who had stood patiently beside her, ready to build a life of calm and quiet love. He had shown her kindness and respect, even as the ground beneath them shifted. She owed him more than she could ever say, yet her heart was no longer his to hold. That realization brought both sorrow and clarity. Life was messy. Love was complicated. And sometimes the right choice wasn't the easiest one. They walked slowly through the garden, the scent of blooming flowers wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. She looked up at him, her heart opening with a tentative trust. "Can we really start over? After everything?" He squeezed her hand gently. "We don't have to be perfect, just honest. I want to be there for you not just as the man you loved before, but as someone who's learned, grown, and never stopped hoping." Her smile was small but real. It was a beginning, not a promise of forever, but a promise to try. And sometimes that was all anyone could ask for. As they walked, a soft breeze lifted strands of her hair, and she felt the weight of the past begin to lift. The years of waiting, the nights filled with silence and longing, they all seemed to fade into the background, replaced by something fragile and new. She realized that love wasn't just about timing. It was about courage, the courage to face the unknown, to forgive, and to believe in second chances. And in that moment, with the sun warming her face and his hand holding hers, she allowed herself to hope again. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape, together. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled, not out of duty or expectation, but because her heart was quietly, beautifully alive. Days passed after that unforgettable afternoon, but nothing felt quite the same anymore. The world around her moved on, yet inside, a quiet storm had begun to brew. The man who had returned stayed close, as if afraid she might slip away again. Their conversations were cautious, like two strangers learning to trust each other after years apart. She found herself questioning everything. Her past choices, the promises she almost made, and what her heart truly wanted. The comfortable life she had planned suddenly seemed like a distant dream, replaced by the uncertainty of rediscovering a love that had been lost but never forgotten. He told her stories of his time away, mistakes made, lessons learned, and regrets carried in silence. His voice was filled with honesty, no longer the reckless youth she remembered, but a man shaped by years of growth and longing. She saw in him a vulnerability that made her heart ache, a rawness she had missed all these years. Yet, trust wasn't easy to rebuild. Every smile held a shadow of doubt, every touch a flicker of fear. She worried if the past would repeat itself, if the distance that once tore them apart was still lurking, waiting to pull them away again. But he was patient, never rushing, always listening. His presence was steady, like a lighthouse in a dark sea, guiding her through the storm of emotions she struggled to navigate. Slowly, she began to let down her walls, allowing herself to feel again without the sharp edge of pain. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they sat together in silence. The air was thick with unspoken words and hope. She finally broke the quiet. How do we move forward from here? After everything, can we really build something lasting? He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the fading light. By being honest, by not pretending the past didn't hurt. We take it one day at a time. I don't have all the answers, but I know I want to try with you. She nodded, feeling a weight lift from her chest. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was real. It was a start. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, their bond grew stronger. They shared laughter, tears, and quiet moments that felt like a balm to their weary souls. She began to see the man before her, not just a boy from her memories, but someone who had changed, someone who was ready to fight for their future. But life, with its unpredictable twists, wasn't done testing them. Rumors began to spread about the wedding that never was, about the man who showed up late, and the woman who chose uncertainty over certainty. Some whispered judgments, others offered sympathy, but the noise was overwhelming. She struggled with the weight of expectations, from family, friends, and even herself. The past wasn't just a memory, it was a living presence, shaping how others saw her and how she saw herself. Doubts crept in again, threatening to unravel the fragile hope they had built. Through it all, he remained her anchor. "Let them talk," he said one night, his voice firm. "What matters is what we choose, not what they expect." Her heart swelled with gratitude and love. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone in the fight. Together, they could face whatever came next. The journey ahead was uncertain and filled with challenges, but it was theirs. And sometimes that was enough. In the quiet moments between fear and hope, she realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about courage, the courage to face the past, to forgive, and to keep moving forward, hand in hand, into the unknown. The whispers and sideways glances followed her like shadows she couldn't shake. The town was small, and secrets traveled faster than the wind. Every time she stepped outside, she felt eyes on her, judging, questioning. The story of her halted wedding, the man who came too late, and the love she dared to rekindle had become a tangled web everyone wanted to unravel. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the man who stood by her side. His quiet strength gave her courage, but even he couldn't shield her from the sting of gossip and raised eyebrows. Friends she once counted on now kept their distance, unsure where her loyalties lay. Family dinners became tense affairs, filled with awkward silences and unspoken worries. One afternoon, she found herself alone in the park, the cool breeze brushing her face as she sat on a bench. Her thoughts raced, torn between the safety of what she had planned and the wild unknown she was stepping into. She wondered if choosing love meant losing everything else. Her phone buzzed. It was him. A simple message. I'm here whenever you need me. That small reminder warmed her heart. She realized that love wasn't about perfection or approval. It was about finding someone who would stand beside her, even when the world turned its back. Determined to reclaim her happiness, she decided to face the rumors head-on. At a community gathering, she stood before the crowd, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Yes, my wedding stopped that day. But it wasn't because I didn't love. It was because I had to choose what felt true to me. Her words rippled through the room. Some nodded in understanding, others looked away, but the courage it took to speak was a victory in itself. Back at home, she and the man she loved sat together, hands entwined. It won't be easy, he said softly, but nothing worth fighting forever is. She smiled, a new strength rising within her. They had faced the past, braved the present, and now stood ready to build a future, no matter how uncertain. In the quiet of the night, as stars sprinkled the sky, she whispered to herself, I chose love, and I will keep choosing it every day. Months had passed since that fateful day, when everything changed. Life wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was real. She had learned that love wasn't about flawless moments or grand gestures. It was about the small, everyday choices to stay, to forgive, to believe. And every morning she woke up beside him, it felt like a quiet victory. They had no lavish wedding plans anymore, no grand ceremony to mark their union. Instead, they built their future quietly, surrounded by genuine smiles and the warmth of acceptance slowly seeping back into their lives. The town's whispers had softened, replaced by curious smiles, and eventually, congratulations. People saw not just the scandal, but the courage it took to follow her heart. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, she felt a calm she hadn't known in years. The man beside her reached for her hand, fingers entwining with hers, grounding her in the moment. Do you ever regret it? He asked softly. She shook her head, smiling. Not for a second. He pulled her close, his voice barely above a whisper. Me, neither. We fought for something real. That's what matters. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers. They had weathered storms of doubt, pain, and judgment, but here they were, stronger, together. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And sometimes that was enough to write a love story that lasts a lifetime.